Welcome to the Fraudcast, everybody. This is a weekly get together that Vito and I host for people in the e-commerce fraud and risk space. And we get together to talk about the latest fraud trends that we're seeing, what's really big in e-commerce when we get together. And it's a really great space to come with questions. As you could see, there's a lot of people on the call, lots of professionals and leaders in the risk space that you can use this group to kind of tap into and get advice on challenges that you're dealing with in your day-to-days. And we have a lot of great stories that are told here where I feel like people could really walk away with some really valuable insights and things to think about and integrate into what they're working on. And there's a few different ways that you can participate during the session. You can, of course, post in the chat. We'll make sure that, we're monitoring, and throughout we'll try to address your questions or comments. But this is definitely intended to be more of a conversational session. This is not your typical sort of webinar lecture style readout. That's not what it's intended to be. This is definitely intended to be more of a conversation. So if you're able to, we love when people are able to be on camera with us. Feel free to come off mute and to interject. That's totally welcome. And let's have a conversation, especially for a session with the topic that we have today. Feel free to just, either raise your hand, come off mute, or throw in the chat any questions or things that you want to talk through. Vito is going to open us up with a little bit of, Vito and Doug today are going to open us up with a little bit of planting our feet into what VAMP is all about, and then we'll kind of get into open discussion and Q&A. So as I said, if you're able to be on camera with us, that's awesome. We love to see that. If not, that's totally fine too. You guys could hang back and be off camera. And with that being said, I'm going to hand things over to Vito.
What is up, y'all? Welcome back. It's Wednesday. There's 43 of you here today. It's almost like VAMP is a big issue. I don't know. Maybe. Well, we have so much to talk about. I don't want to get in the way of it, because joining us today is someone who's very near and dear to my heart, a good friend of mine. We've got Doug Agurkis on the line here, Senior Manager of Chargebacks at Signify. Doug, how you doing over there?
Doing very well. Excited to talk about VAMP. Excited to talk about chargebacks. In fact, we just had a recent recovery that was really big. That was exciting for us. We had a customer file a fraud chargeback on this giant gas generator, claiming they never got it. It was like $15,000. They placed the order over the phone. We were able to track that phone back to a business that cardholder was the owner of. We then looked at his Facebook page and saw a recent post, new arrival, just in stock. And it's a picture of that generator in front of their business, multiple angles, like all of this stuff, the same day that we show it being shipped to that business. So that person, left just the right amount of breadcrumbs that it was a slam dunk, like, let's get our money back. Let's recover this. That's, something I'm always excited about. That's why I love chargebacks. It's just the simplicity of like, let's get money, let's recover money. And so that was a good case for us to look at, of just like, okay, we can continue to go down this path and find these breadcrumbs that showed this was the cardholder.
I love to hear it. And just so all of you know, anytime that I meet with Doug and there's some sort of like actual work to get done, I immediately clog up about 25 minutes of that 30-minute conversation with, what'd you win back today? What'd you win back today? What are they trying to get away with today? So love to hear those stories. And, I could talk about them for hours. I could talk about the human element as to why these criminals are so apt to give themselves away for hours. But let's talk about VAMP today. Now, Jenna kind of laid it out there for you. So many of you have come back here, so you know the deal. But for all of you who are new here, 48 people, for all of you who are new here, we all got thick skin. All right. So feel free to interrupt me at any point in time. Come off mute, throw your questions out there, because that's when the magic happens. All right. So I'm going to start it off. Doug, what is VAMP?
VAMP is Visa's new acquirer monitoring program that just got kicked off this April 1st, so a couple of weeks ago. It's a new program that replaces a few other programs that they used to have. So they had Visa Dispute Monitoring Program and a Visa Fraud Monitoring Program that applied to merchants that tracked both disputes and fraud. And And so this new program kind of gets rid of those, adds a new couple of factors to it that will be interesting to see how those changes affect people. So some of the changes, the biggest one is that program consolidation. So it is consolidating basically those dispute monitoring program and the fraud monitoring program, two programs that had different calculations, fees and fines associated with them that merchants had to navigate, and it just applied to merchants. And so under this new program, it'll consolidate those two. There'll just be one singular ratio that merchants have to deal with, and it'll apply to both acquirers and merchants. And so there's this accountability shift. Uh, Acquirers are now going to be held accountable to this as well. And so it really will promote some collaboration between merchants and their acquirers to help drive down fraud and disputes in the Visa network. Another new thing that's coming with it is a fee structure. The old programs had flat monthly fees that merchants would have to deal with. So I think they usually started around $25,000 per month, and then they would escalate the longer you were in the program. The new fee structure will be it's on a per chargeback or dispute basis. And so depending on acquirers will have either a $5 or a $10, depending on what program they trigger, and merchants will have $10 per chargeback now instead of a flat fee per month. The programs will also include card testing monitoring. So this will be really important for acquirers and merchants both to be proactively monitoring for card testing within their network. Dispute resolution is another super interesting one. There's some controversy on this. So Visa has two different products, Rapid Dispute Resolution and then Cardholder Dispute Resolution Network, so RDR and CDRN. These are basically tools that merchants could leverage to proactively refund transactions that are being disputed in real time. And Visa originally said, hey, if you do this, we'll exclude those from your calculations and you can help drive down your ratios. But last minute, Visa said, you know, we're going to backtrack on that and we're going to not allow you to exclude those. Those are going to be included, which was kind of a bold move. I don't think people saw that coming. Visa in the past has really used these programs to help drive merchants towards their products at time. And so it's an interesting move. We'll see how that goes. And then finally, there's this removal of early warnings that merchants usually had. And we can go more into that in the next slide, but I'll pause if there's any questions.
I'm wondering, I see this and I'm in charge of all the fraud elements of my business, but also obviously chargebacks are in my purview. Am I more apt to wind up on what we would call the bad boy list, the monitoring program? Is it easier for me to slide into that now because of this? And if so, what should I be on the hyper focus for to make sure that the powers that be at my company don't say, hey, what the heck? You know, we're getting hammered now with off fees. What's going on?
Yeah, that's a great question. And for sure, I think that merchants are going to find themselves really dealing with this more than the previous programs. In fact, if we go to the next slide, we can kind of look at the differences and why I think this is going to be a big issue, right? So under the previous programs, VDMP and VFMP, as I mentioned, they didn't apply to acquirers. It was just merchants. There were three different stages that a merchant could fall into: early warning, standard, and excessive. No fees or fines were associated with the early warning. You would just enter the program. Once you hit standard and excessive, you would then have fines and fees associated with it. But now if you look at the new VAMP program, it now does apply to acquirers, and those thresholds are really low, right? So starting in 2026, there's an above standard stage that's 30 basis points. And then the excessive will be 50 basis points. So it's significantly lower than what merchants were having to deal with in the past. And then if you look at the merchant standards, it's higher, right? So they removed those two stages. There's just excessive. In 2025, the threshold's 150 basis points, and then it'll go down to 90 basis points in 2026. But what's super interesting is, and I think what's going to be super complicated, is these two different thresholds for acquirers and merchants. You're going to have merchants that maybe under the merchant thresholds, right? Let's say they're at 70 basis points, but you have your acquirer who's at 50 basis, like held to 50 basis points. How are those acquirers going to manage their merchant portfolios and assess those fees and fines that they obviously are going to pass to merchants? And I think that's where merchants are going to be in these programs more. It's because of the thresholds that are applied to acquirers, which will then default to merchants.
would the acquirers be less? And I might have the whole thing convoluted here. So please, I got my bulletproof jacket on. If I'm wrong, tell me. But if the acquirers are at these lower thresholds, would it be more difficult for, some people to run their cards or kind of get authorized? Would there be less risk tolerance coming through there, or is that just like a bank related issue? I see that number in that gulf, and I get worried about, oh my, less people are going to be coming through. I'm going to have less people shopping with me. What do I do?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a challenge. I think acquirers are going to be a lot more strict with what merchants they even allow on their platform, because of this, because obviously it goes across their portfolio, right? It's not just one merchant that's going to do this, it's multiple merchants. And so you could have one merchant though that just has a huge fraud problem that now is going to impact that entire portfolio, and that acquirer will start cracking down on that, and you'll start to see approval rates go down because of that realistically.
We've talked a bunch about the year of the false positive here on the Fraudcast, and maybe I ate some bad dinner or something, and in the middle of the night I'm thinking, oh no, 2025 is going to be the year of the false positive for so many reasons, but one of them was feeling this out with Vamp. And when I see these numbers and when I hear you just said, Doug, I get worried that, like you said, numbers are going to go down, approval rates are going to go down, revenue is going to go down. So I want to open up to the group real quick. What kind of war stories, success stories, light at the end of the tunnel, or maybe that light turned out to be a train, have you had in relation to working with acquiring banks and the card networks? Has anyone ever wound up on the monitoring program or gotten off of the monitoring program? And if you have any sort of kind of stories around that, that would be fantastic. As number two, a lot of stuff has just been dropped on you here, so I'm sure you've got some questions around this as well. So I'll open up the conversation to that. Well, Angie's got a great question. Let's just jump into there. Angie says, and Angie, if you're here, please feel free to come off mute and dive in. But Angie asks, are notifications of fraud included in the calculation under the new program? For example, with Apple Pay, there's liability shift, but notification of fraud counts in the calculation today. Doug, take it away.
Yeah, great question. And yeah, it does, right? So the old programs, the dispute monitoring program just looked at chargebacks. VFPM looked at notifications of fraud. The new program is going to be total TC40 notifications of fraud plus total non-fraud chargebacks. So both of those are going to apply. And so it's really important for merchants to be getting that TC40 data from their acquirer so that they can monitor themselves on this. If you're not getting that, you're going to be blind to what your true ratio is going to be. We know that not all notifications of fraud turn into a chargeback. And so, again, if you don't have that data, it's going to be hard to really know where you stand within these programs.
Anybody working with TC40 reports right now? Anyone can tell us a little bit? As Doug mentioned, not all of them come back as chargebacks. So I'd be curious to hear from the bunch here. When you're working TC40 reports, when you receive TC40 reports, kind of what you do with them and how you action them. I'd love to hear from you on that.
I'm lost. I don't know what is TC40. I don't know what you're talking about.
It sounds like something from the Terminator, but Doug, if you can give us a little bit of insight there, because it's a wild one.
Yeah, so it is similar to it's notifications of fraud. So anytime a cardholder calls into their bank to file a fraudulent dispute, that issuing bank is required to send that in as a notification of fraud or reported fraud. Those will go then through the network to acquirers. And like I said, that's not always going to be a chargeback. That issuer may eat that because it's low dollar. There could be multiple circumstances why it doesn't become a chargeback, but everything that gets reported from a cardholder standpoint needs to then end up in a notification of fraud or the TC40 report.
So should we be getting this TC40 report from our acquirer?
Yeah, that would be something that I would highly recommend every merchant to have that conversation with their acquirer to figure out how you can get that data from them. It's available, right? Every acquirer should have it. And again, it's going to be critical for merchants to be able to monitor where they stand within these programs, utilizing that data.
And that's just fraud. You mentioned that non-fraud chargebacks should be included in our calculation as well.
That's correct. And that one's more straightforward. Just it's looking at the fraud, it's looking at the reason code for chargeback. So it'll be excluding the 10.4s and then be the, the 11s, 12, 13 reason codes. Those would be the non-fraud ones. And every acquirer is going to manage this differently. So you're going to have merchants with completely different scenarios that are happening to them. Right? It's not going to be standardized across acquirers.
This sounds like a fun thing to do, to wrangle together all of these TC40 reports. Anyone with some sort of good light at the end of the tunnel, the one that's not attached to the train, about collating and kind of getting all your TC40 reports into one area, all of your notifications of fraud into one area. If not, Doug, I'd love to hear if you've got any sort of best practices related to that, so that I'm not wrangling cats, so to speak.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about that. I think the key to all of this is collaboration between merchants and acquirers. Like it's hard to give a best practice to it necessarily, but I think that's the first conversation you should be having with your acquirer is how do I get this data and how do I make sure my monitoring of this aligns with what they see as well. I think it's got to be aligned. And then it's also to talk to your acquirer about what does their portfolio look like? Because there's no way for a merchant to monitor their acquirers and where they're falling in these programs. So that collaboration piece is going to be super critical.
And out of my curiosity here, I'm Acme Company and I sell these great pens. How many acquirers do I have? Like, how many acquirers does a typical merchant have?
It could be multiple, right? It could be as simple as one, and it could be as complicated as many as you want, right? I think merchants are becoming more sophisticated in how they run their payments, and they're looking at, having a challenger type of system with their processors and acquirers so that they can see who can get them better approval rates, better pricing, all of that, right? So it's not surprising to see merchants with multiple.
I'd love to see in the chat if you could put either the number of acquirers you work with or a question mark indicating that you have no idea. I think that would be really cool because I'm firmly in the, Jesse, there we go. I'm in the question mark camp myself right here. So glad to know. I think, Doug, I think you're giving us a little bit of homework here, but it's that good kind of homework, that stuff that like you'll thank me for later. Oh, we got 1, 2, and 3. Oh my, wow. We're just popping off here. Awesome. Now, Justin, please, I don't want to speak for you. You've got a great voice, so why don't you come off there?
Well, and maybe this is just ignorance on my part, not completely understanding the acquirer term, but like I'm thinking, right, all these different platforms where we could potentially see a dispute, right? And it's a separate dispute, like Maritza mentioned, like, Stripe. So if we use Loop for our return software, but also there is a component where someone could exchange or upsell or whatever. And if they purchase something that way, then the money's collected through Stripe. Now, if there's an issue with that, the dispute comes through Stripe versus, most of the disputes that come through Shopify, but we also have disputes that come through PayPal. We can have disputes that go through Afterpay. We could have disputes that go through Amazon. I'm trying to think. There's probably maybe 1 or 2 others that I'm forgetting about off the top of my head. But I guess that's my question. Are those all the acquirers that I'm mentioning?
That's a tough one to answer, to be honest. Like I'd hate to lead you astray here with a wrong answer. I would say that's something you would want to reach out to your connections with your processor on to really get alignment and clarity from.
Great stuff there, Justin. Great stuff, everybody. Some more questions rolling in like the thunder. We've got Tony Drake who asks, are fraud-related declines included in TC40 accounts? Is there any sort of discrepancy between an order that is approved or declined Great question.
Yeah, they will not be. So it's only settled transactions. So if a bank declines it for fraud reasons, it won't come through on this. It'll only be on settled transactions. So that's a great question. But yeah, those will not be part of it.
Well done, Tony. Jessica, I think you had your question answered just there with the discrepancy between the acquirer and the payment processor. Am I correct?
I'm feeling that they're the same. The acquirer and the payment processor are pretty much the same thing. Am I wrong in that?
Your payment processor or gateway can work with 600 different acquirers. So most of the time, as a merchant, you know only one. Stripe, for example. How many acquirers Stripe works?
Paula adds they are different, but some merchants have the same acquirer and processor. So yes, this is a kind of it'd be maybe really nice to draw this out, but I think, Doug, are we in the kind of right ballpark here?
Yes.
Awesome. Question from me. MRC came up with a bunch of guidance on this, right? Didn't MRC just have a little bit of a post about this subject?
Their post was really, I think it was timely. I think the good news from this post is Visa has noticed a lot of feedback on confusion on this from both acquirers and merchants, and so they have extended their advisory period that was initially for 3 months going through July 1st, now out 3 more months to October 1st. So until October 1st, no fines or fees will be associated with these programs. It'll give time for merchants and their acquiring banks to work through a lot of these issues and confusion and get alignment. And so great news from MRC that they were able to provide this feedback to Visa. Visa heard it, acknowledged it, and it gives us more time to provide even more feedback to them as we go through the growing pains of this.
I think they're reading the room pretty well here, because even though we're all remote, I have a good sense of our little Fraudcast family here. And today I feel like everyone's kind of got the pens out, scribbling the notes, kind of rubbing the chin a little bit, because the touch and go element to this is felt and real. So I think that's pretty keen on their part to make that kind of move. My good friend Kristen says, sorry if you already covered this. Has Visa defined what qualifies as an enumeration transaction? Is it only fraud-coded chargebacks or something else? I haven't been able to get a straight answer from our acquirer nor Visa, and Jamie chimes in saying this. So Doug, has Visa defined what qualifies as an enumeration transaction?
This is a space I don't have much detail on either. It's been thrown out there that this is part of the program, but to be honest, I haven't seen clearly defined terms around this or how it's going to be monitored.
Jamie, do you have any suspicions about what that might mean, or anybody else? Anyone kind of barking up that tree? Because when I think about enumeration transactions, I think about card testing, but I'm wondering where your head's at on this, Jamie.
I have read one thing, and I can't even remember where I saw it. I don't know if it was like their original Visa thresholds that came out or something. There's so many different publications of this stuff, but I saw one thing one time about the enumeration count, and that it's actually different than the chargeback thresholds. And to me, it's card testing. So these would be $0 or maybe you have the penny off or something like that. So I would think that it would be a totally different threshold and all the things, different than what the actual chargeback program, I guess, is. But I can't remember where I saw that threshold. I can't remember exactly what it said. But that's sort of my main concern here, because that is something completely, new. We've been on the fraud monitoring chargeback program before, but the enumeration, the card testing is what we're currently encountering. So I'm trying to scrape together well, what is that threshold and how do I quantify that to make sure that we're under that threshold.
I'm in the exact same boat that you're in. I saw a singular post at one point. The thresholds were vastly different for sure for card testing. I can't find that again or remember it
Same.
either. But it was, yeah, drastically different than what the chargeback and disputes one is.
And then I read something about them sort of like reevaluating and pulling back on what that metric was, and like a TBD basically of, when that was going to be recommunicated or something. So that part has been like totally muddy for me, versus like the chargeback, thresholds and stuff that they've communicated.
Yeah, we'll say this too. It's super difficult the way that this is being released because merchants, they're supposed to be getting this directly from their acquirer. So I think that's where we're seeing multiple different posts. Is this got not leaked, but this was submitted by one merchant, a merchant seeing something else from their acquirer. There's no real source of truth coming from Visa on this necessarily that I think a lot of merchants would love to see.
I think the acquirers are terrible about like having any type of relationship. You have to be the one to like reach out or ask or see if you can find anybody, and good luck with all of that. They really don't care about the relationship at all. It's definitely like a single road toxic relationship there. And like it's, I have yet to actually get any of this information from anyone related to like our bank, Visa, anything. Nothing, not a word.
That's super unfortunate, and I don't think you're alone there. I think that's probably the vast majority of people still in the dark, still waiting to hear anything.
Yeah, I mean, I can't even think of anything that's not some sort of like world news event where you're waiting to find. Nothing in our space has felt like this, where Jamie, as you said, I don't remember where I saw it. I feel like everything that I know about this, I have no idea where I saw it. It was like a fever dream. Was it real? I'm waiting for like that white puff of smoke to come out of the chimney to know that there's a new pope. Like, it's just so odd that this is going on, but I'm glad I'm not the only one who feels that way. So if we could break this down, because we could chew on this all day. If we could break this down, Doug, into, hey, I'm Vito. I love baseball, but I'm pretty much a seam head. I don't know too much. If I could just look at this in terms of an equation that I should be thinking about, right? What would be the math on this?
It's becoming simpler, which is good news, at least. With the consolidation of these things, you're not monitoring two different types of calculations from different sources. There's just going to be this one. It says chargebacks here, but it really is non-fraud chargebacks plus your TC40 over your settled transactions. And that's what every merchant needs to figure out how to ensure they're getting that data accurately so that they can monitor this.
Get your screenshot buttons out now. I don't even know if that's the thing. Command Shift for the heck out of this, right? If you're on Apple. So yeah, this is kind of where you could set your North Star. My good friend Robert, I want to get to this question too while we're at it. This is a great question. Where do the non-Visa cards stand in all of this? Are there some future watchouts? So is VAMP going to take a new first letter acronym? Is there going to be BAMP as well for Bank of America? Like, what else do we got to worry about?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. That's probably going to happen. Absolutely, probably is not the best way to say that, but yeah,
all the time, 50% of the time.
Yeah, we've seen that historically with MasterCard, right on the heels of Visa coming out with something similar but different enough too that it's just like, okay, you had to complicate it a little bit more. So I would highly anticipate MasterCard shortly after coming out with something similar.
MAMP. Wow. Well, Doug, this is fantastic stuff. If we're going to walk away from this with a bit of a survival checklist, make sure I have my batteries, make sure I've got, potable water, what would that be?
Perfect. We have some takeaways here. I think I won't go through every one of these, but I think the general theme is being very proactive in your risk management, not being reactive. You got to be on top of this. You got to be anticipating and finding these trends before they happen and shutting it down. The other big piece of this is really having that data so you can monitor where you are, having that relationship with your acquiring bank to understand where you fall within their portfolio. Again, more proactiveness, improve customer communication to minimize disputes. The more you can do to just avoid chargebacks in the first place will be the key to this. Refining your chargeback processes, obviously, recoveries are great if you can do that. It doesn't necessarily impact VAMP in any way, but it's getting your money back when chargebacks do occur. And just being on top of it. I think just the more proactive you can get, the better off you're going to be in the scenario. There's two things you can control is your fraud and risk, systems, and then the data that you're getting from your acquirer and ensuring you're monitoring appropriately.
Any questions on any of these checkpoints? Because there has been a bombshell dropped in the chat that I would also like to get to, but I would love if you've got any questions on any of these checkpoints. If not,
What do I need to do after this call?
yeah, what's the first thing? The first thing I do in 5 minutes when I get out of here, Doug. If you were new to this space, what is it? Where's your first go-to?
I would say reach out to your acquiring bank to get as much information as you can from them, not only on how they're going to manage this, but the data that you need from them as well.
Let's say I'm going to work with Signify tomorrow. Do I need to do anything? Or Signify covers for me all of this?
Yeah, so we could absolutely help with the navigation through these of helping just the shift to a proactive risk management system. I think that's our bread and butter, obviously. But then also we have built monitoring for merchants to based off of these calculations, monitor where they're at on a monthly basis. So we can help with that for sure. And then we proactively look at those, because ideally what happens is if you get closer to those thresholds, you want to be proactively working with your acquirer to try to avoid these programs as best you can. And sometimes that's just saying, hey, we know we're going to be above thresholds, but we have a plan to mitigate this and we expect to be down in a few months, right? Like that's something that we also help do at Signified is build out those plans for somebody who does happen to trigger these programs. We're well equipped with the data to show we're confident that based off of the actions we've taken, here's what caused the root cause of this fraud. Here's what we've done. And we think in 2 months, they'll be below thresholds and everything will be fine. Like that's the type of work that we love to do here at Signify.
Anatoly's sentiment, I think, is felt in many ways. And I think it's really crystallized in this point by Ryan. And Ryan, I applaud you for this because I think this is a great thing to chew on as we go to that 45-minute mark here. Conspiracy theory. Is this very confusing VAMP rollout potentially intentional? When you think of any product rollout, there is always that level of customer feedback that drives the final development or strategy stages. Seems like a strange approach, but I've seen it firsthand with other technology products. So I'm wondering if that's potentially in the realm. Now, all of you are great minds, but when I read that, I was like, I want to hear what Shelly has to say about that. So, and Jamie too, and Justin, everyone. But I just think that this is grounds for like the moon is made out of cheese feeling, but that it might be real. How do we know the moon is not made out of cheese? So, what do y'all feel about that?
Honestly, I feel sometimes I'm just like to see how much we'll put up with. It's like, well, this is confusing because we know information about it. Okay, we'll take like 4 steps back. I don't know. Here's all of your, full body suit because the Ebola plague is out. Oh, wait, turns out you don't need the full body suit. We're good. I don't like that's, but I'm with you on the conspiracy theory. I think I'm right there. Because
it is kind of like, the parents are telling the kids, and, I don't care, like deal with it, right? Yeah.
I think of this is a weird thing that happened at a previous company of mine. We sold bottled water for like $2 for years. And then suddenly one year we went through a price increase and we doubled the price of bottled water. Like actually more than doubled it. I think it went up to $5. People revolted. And like we dropped the price back down to $2.50. within 3 months because people were so angry that we increased the bottle of water price so much. We're just testing them. All right, see how far they'll go. Oh, that was too much. Okay, step back, step back, step back. That's like, when I read that, that's exactly what I thought.
So watch this space. We'll take bets as to where this winds up. But I really do feel like you're onto something there, Ryan and Shelly. The bottled water thing is great because that knob, we put the knob on 11, right? We went up to 11 and now we're coming back down to 6, but we started at 2. So it's all a win, right? Guys, everybody, fantastic conversation. I really want to thank you, Doug, for coming out and meeting the crew, and jazz hands / poetry snaps for Doug for taking the time. Shelly, I wish we did have an emoji for poetry snaps. That'd be really cool. But this is not the end of the conversation. I think we brought up 2 big topics in the last 2 weeks between returns abuse and VAMP that aren't really going anywhere and can't possibly be solved in 45 minutes. So mark this space. We will come back to this, especially, because every minute that passes is a new revelation in this game. Use this community, please. Use myself and Doug and everybody here as kind of sounding boards. Our DMs are wide open. Doug, welcome to the Fraudcast. Your DMs are wide open. So if you've got a question about your specific situation, your relationship with your acquirers, maybe you can't get somebody on the horn, feel free to reach out to us and reach out to each other. And from the bottom of my heart, I do thank you for coming out because I've learned so much today, and I hope you've learned a little bit too. If not, you've learned that you've got your work cut out for us, as we all do. So until next week, my friends, it was such a pleasure seeing you. Do not hesitate to reach out because this is not the end of this conversation, and I wish you all the best of weeks. And by the way, Jenna, maybe you want to throw in something. We won't be here next week, will we?
Yeah, so we're not going to be here next week. We're going to be at our industry event that we host every year called Flow Summit. We will be doing an in-person Fraudcast, but we will be getting together the following week at our normal time, as always. And we will likely be diving a little bit more into some returns topics. But as always, like if you guys have anything that you want to cover specifically, please feel free to reach out to Vito or myself, and we'll make sure that we get that integrated.
Hit us up. Great seeing y'all. Have a great week. For those of you going to New York, I'll see you in the Big Apple.
Thanks, guys.
Let's go Mets.